Here we go. We're live.
Nice. How's it going, guys?
All
Uh,
right.
Good to hear. Today we're talking about decentralized and distributed power in organizations. Um, I think this is going to be a really fun discussion. The paper is really good. It's one of my favorites. It's a nice read. I'd encourage everyone to take a look at it. But okay, I'll hand it off to you, Watson. Do you want to start us off?
Sure. You guys hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. Okay. Um,
Okay. Can you hear now?
yes.
Okay,
Cool.
great.
Okay.
Uh,
Yeah.
Basically, the gist of the paper is decentralization actually, paradoxically, can increase power and, over the populace instead of what people would think normally is that a centralized environment like a feudalism would be where what you would think traditionally centralized environment would be where the most power and the ability for power to be to control a populace. But decentralized and distributed environments can actually have more far-reaching effects and actually more effective power. Some of the people that have written on the subject, mostly Foucault, spent a bunch of time in his career. It's a really popular French philosopher. Um, Generally speaking, or at a high level for Foucault, his argument is that the way that you traditionally think about power is you may think of someone with the ability to punish you, and they'll prod you out or take you out in the middle of the street and do that in front of a bunch of other people, and then that might be how the power is projected. So you could think of France and the guillotine in the 1700s or something like that. And then you traditionally what someone might think is, hey, we became more humane and we stopped using the guillotine, and that's what that because we became more humane. That's what why we don't do that anymore, and everything's just better now, or what have you. But his argument is actually the reason why we stopped. We moved from punishment into what he calls discipline, is because discipline is more powerful. You can control more people that way. So it's kind of a paradox. Um, so he uses the example of what you could call a panopticon, and a bunch of you probably have read the book 1984 and Big Brother's watching and that kind of thing. Um, he's kind of it's similar to that idea where everyone's being watched, but the way that the power is projected is through observation and things like that, and knowing that okay, there's a bunch of people being not necessarily punished but disciplined in some prison somewhere, and you're being watched and you could be put in that place. It's kind of it's easier to control large amounts of people. So if you were to say to take the old way of projecting power, like a king doing the punishment with guillotines, you couldn't control a country with 350 million people in it. You have to have some type of system of discipline. So that's a modern form of discipline. And then what you see now is there's more distributed forms of power where um, the standards bodies and things that look democratic are actually controlled by some type of leadership class or oligarchy or something like that. But it's even more powerful because you don't have to be observed. So I'll stop there and just let people comment or whatever. Did you guys get a chance to look at the paper?
Yeah, I was able to read it, read over it, and it's I mean, it's definitely a paradox. You know, it's one of those things where, you know, at first view you're like, what? But then, you know, once you read through the paper or hear what you just said, it makes a lot of sense.
Mhm.
Um, no, definitely.
Yeah, it's pretty. I don't know, it's a little bit more philosophical than what I would probably want to introduce to this group, but I don't think you can get around it. I don't think you can get around talking about the subject without talking about things that are more, I guess, psychological as far as on this subject, decentralization, and because you would think, and Tristan, if Tristan was here, he might be able to speak on this a bit more, but if you were to take something like a Bitcoin and say, okay, this is this perfect decentralized or distributed actually system, anonymous, so it gets around the power, the observational style power, the discipline style. But there's some inherent problems where if there's economies of scale, then you can have some type of leadership class or oligarchy or group of people that can control most of the nodes. And there's an argument that Tristan was putting forth last month, where it might be inherent to any type of system that's what you would call incentive based. So if there's enough incentive for you to contribute to create a resource, there's enough incentive for the power to become centralized, essentially. So that's what some of those papers were, or some of the references are at the bottom. And so the problem creeps back in. There's some things that I think are solutions good, but I'd like to hear what you guys think.
Is this conversation independent of the morality of like power or control or anything like that, or is this just like observational, or is this?
I believe that that's a big part of it. I mean, we're a cooperative, so we kind of like things to be more distributed, but I'm kind of looking at it in an objective way with this paper, so it's up to you.
So the idea is to try to lay everything out, including how you could be taken advantage of.
Yeah.
So looking at, you're usually going to go down the pros and talk about how distributed protocols and everything else are going to be beneficial. And so you can say where they can break down in general. Some of the things that aren't talked about are where it feels like it's distributing the control or the power, or overall it feels the stability is, because it's distributed, is going to be stronger. And if you're not aware of some of the items that are in the document, then someone else could have control and you don't even realize it. So what
Right,
are
which is slightly different than willingly, like I don't know, like deferring control over certain decisions to people.
Yeah, it's different. I mean,
You know what I mean? It's like as people, I feel like we're always on some level every day of our lives, uh, vulnerable to, you know, either subversive influence or whatever else. Like that's kind of part of our life every day now. But it sounds like I don't know. So I read through a bit of the paper, and it like it kind of took me a little bit off guard. Not bad or anything, but the idea is like is distributed power through an organization or some level of accountability on a level that's not to one person.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like I don't know. I don't want to say, oh, humanity's terrible, or anything crazy like that. But I feel like people naturally are going to glom together. I mean, that's where you have an organization in the first place, and then within that, you may have other micro struggles or something like that, where people may subversively try to make power grabs.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess the question is, I don't know, there's this higher order that's almost necessary for people to not only work within their own best interest, but if that's not within your family, sometimes that is a hard sell for people.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the, communist Cuba before Czechoslovakia and Russia, right, where it was very much based on morality based.
Mm-hmm.
And then that kind of started to fall a little bit by the wayside. Like the morality of the thing is all that there is, even though there's obviously somebody at the helm of that, and that's kind of like a very obvious dictatorship, but
Mm-hmm.
the same kind of idea where like, oh, you should want to do all these things for the morality of it, not because there's any material gain or whatever else.
Mm-hmm.
So in an organization where you go to make money, how likely is it that you're going to find a group of people big enough for an organ? I mean, I know it can happen. I'm not saying that it can't. I believe it can. Is the idea that this could be the norm?
Distributed? What would be the norm?
I guess I'm trying to. Maybe I'm being too goal-oriented, trying to figure out like what the outcome we're looking for in this conversation is. Is there an answer that's trying to be, or is there a question that we're trying to answer, or is it just let's talk about the paper?
Yeah. Basically, decentralization and power within an organization where you're trying to have a bunch of people get together. Is it going to be better? Can it work? Those are good. Those are valid questions. The moral question is a valid question. If you want to think about, like the example I'd bring up is law firms. There's the largest law firms, the top 3. There'll be 40% of them will be partners. So 40% of them will be owners with property rights. So you've got 2 or 3 tiers in really most consultancies, and there will be the top tier for partners, and there'll be people who aren't partners, or you can have senior partners, and people who aren't partners. And so you've got a hierarchy, right? But it's very, very flat. It's not like what you would see at Apple or something like that. And so when you start talking about power, well, those people have property rights. Everybody has a partner. And then when you were saying earlier, can it work? That's part of the question. Well, it works all the time. We see it all the time.
So this isn't like this is distributed power. I work in a consultancy, and I'm not a partner. I don't have property rights. And there are times when it's not very fun. Mm-hmm. Even when you're trying to help that partner do something that's not stupid, like this will hurt you in the future. Please, I implore you, try not to do that, right? So I don't know. I mean, I guess that one's kind of hard for me because I'm in the position where I am not a partner and don't feel like there's, I don't have any of that distributed power, right? So I might as well be at Apple or wherever. At least then, because they do the same thing. We're like, oh, we're fairly flat, and it's true. You can go talk to a partner if you want to. It doesn't mean anything, but you can go talk to them. But at least there, like if you were at a hierarchy, I think that almost makes it. I don't know. For some people, maybe it wouldn't be as easy, but at least it's explicit, power distribution, and not this like guise of, oh no, you also have a voice. You do. No one's going to listen to you when you use it, but like I mean, that's not always the case by any means. But on certain things, it's just going to be like yelling into the wind. Something's if they realize that they're very impactful, then they'll go, listen a little better maybe. But so even if everyone had equal power, that's still, you're still very vulnerable to certain things because, like I talked about earlier, people kind of band together, and then you start to have this equal power. So if everyone was going to vote, but you've got somebody in the shadows, building a coalition, right? That person now has more power, and they've also kind of spearheaded themselves as the person that brought everyone together.
That's right. Coalitional power. It's interesting to compare that and say, could you do Congress in a better way and make it a hierarchy? I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's what happens. But part of the paper, one of the main things in the paper is that if someone wants to exploit you, one of the best ways to do it is to give you as much autonomy as possible and make you feel like you have a voice, and make you feel and have you freely give your resources, your ideas, and everything to them. And that's what's trying to demonstrate in the paper. So, at the
to a partner.
Yeah.
Any of all of the responsibility and none of
Yeah.
And I think one of the big things is that was pointed out also is we're moving towards that, like what you were saying earlier, Watson. You're not going to have a hierarchy that's going to be able to control this many people. So you're going to end up seeing more and more of that. You see stuff at companies like Google and GitHub and stuff where they're pushing down ideas that at first everybody's feeling great about, and over the last, 2 or 3 years, a lot of those the bubbles have started to pop, where people don't feel like, they realize, oh, we don't have as much say or control.
Right.
There's a lot of exploitation that's actually happening. The benefits we were saying that felt really great aren't really, they're just kind of a mirage or whatever, or toys.
Yeah.
And so that's like the very first level. I think we're barely, in my mind, into like a age where with the internet and everybody watching everything, then I think people are a lot more aware. So the control is going to get more and more sophisticated. And so you're seeing stuff like co-ops popping up all over. And what I take from the paper and a lot of these sites, if you read some of the background papers, are we're going to get into a stage where you need to be able to know whether one of these distributed, should be egalitarian type of group is actually what you think it is. We've talked about worker directed and other type of things for what type of control in the past, but you were saying when we started that a lot of this is getting philosophical and maybe more complex, but I think that's just going to be a requirement, and I don't know where exactly we start other than we got to do it because the world's going to get more complex and we're going to have to deal with that. The control, and it'll start, the whole U.S. could feel like it's distributed, everyone works for themselves, and you don't realize what's going on.
Right.
Yeah, Taylor, you brought up from this paper. What I take from it is, what I'm most like the example that I have in my mind is a lot of the tech companies that are out. They tend to treat their developers very well in the sense of benefits that they're given. Those may be in the form of they say that, well, we'll give you equity of in the company's a private company, or we'll give you unlimited vacation time. But it's that was my favorite, the unlimited vacation time, where it's it's very popular, but it's sort of like a forced choice and almost like a shaming. You have unlimited vacation time, but no one's gonna take a month off of vacation. No one's a constant month. 30 days or whatever. And it's like I think that's more so on the internalized level. Taylor, what you said as far as about GitHub and these other companies, I wonder at which point the rubber hits the road. When do people start to see, this is what's going on? And that's the most interesting part to me, because the benefits are very nice, and compared to other companies and especially across other industries, you don't see the type of benefits and treatments that a lot of engineers are given. And so that's the part, just like you said. I wonder. We see a lot of cooperatives, and it's very popular in the software industry. Cooperatives are popping up, but I wonder at which point that just clicks for people.
One thing I wanted to point out that you said, so that unlimited vacation time it's a empty gesture. So yes, you can take your vacation, but you're supposed to, by your own volition, refuse to take a month or two. And so because you choose, it makes it that much more powerful instead of them telling you. So that's what it's like, a totalitarian.
Yeah.
That's where it gets ideological.
I think it's even more interesting than that. So that's one of the things that I've been really interested by. So we're talking about organizations and workers, right? Mm-hmm. And one of the things that I find very interesting is that on the surface, when the terms of employment or the contract agreement, right, between an employer and a worker starts to meet this level of, oh, we just don't make it explicit because it's whatever. You get unlimited vacation, which is total horseshit. Like you don't get unlimited vacation, right? Everybody knows that. And this thing or that thing, or we have this thing come on site. It's kind of like Las Vegas, right? Like you can walk out of the casino anytime you want. But we do things to trap you a little bit, right? And it looks really good until you have a problem. And these things are all kind of the same thing, but these are also tricks, more or less, where, like, we're talking about totalitarian regimes and some of these other kind of scary things that happen in the world. The rules, like, you might get in trouble for you don't know why. You don't understand what the rule was. All you know is at the end, like, you're being shamed by your neighbors or whatever else. And if you're that guy that was dumb enough to believe that you have unlimited vacation and you take a 4-week vacation, everybody's going to look at you, not just internally, but your coworkers are going to look at you like, oh, and you might get treated a little bit differently. So I think that the terms of employment being less clear is one of the worst evolutions, if you want to call it an evolution, in like tech world culture, whatever.
Yeah. It's worse for you and me, but better for people who want to control you. So you look sad, David.
No, not sad.
Okay.
I don't know if it's in general, but I know that for example, at Volk, in order to keep that level of not screwing everybody over, we get together once a week and we're focused on trying to increase that trust level and then talking about stuff when people do silly things. So there's not this long amount of time where, hey, we know we said unlimited vacation, but you're talking about it all the time, and so it never gets to this big blown up, snickering behind someone's back because they're being different. You're just all in it together and talking about it together. And I mean, maybe it doesn't scale to an organization of 100 people, but then a co-op at 100 people, I don't know. Does it scale? Is that a different conversation?
Well, then you have people that are kind of like unwitting, like arbiters of that thing, right? So I am enforcing power unwittingly, like I don't realize it, but I'm enforcing that power over another coworker, kind of by shaming them or whatever else, or saying, "Oh, you're doing too much," even though it's unlimited. That's another one of those kind of interesting tricks where, you're talking about distributed whatever. You also have distributed discipline. I don't know, how exactly to phrase that. But.
You were saying something, David.
Yeah, I was just going to say real quick a couple of things that I think, so before the meeting started, I mentioned the Doug Rushkoff book, Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus, and that, capitalism is built on it has a certain operating system kind of thing, where it's doing what it's intended to do. There's some sense that I think that there's kind of a path of least resistance. There's the reason that worked so well and for so long wasn't because necessarily that there are people that are enforcing it, but because it's beneficial generally for everyone to go along, generally. At the point where it stops being generally better for everyone, it will, of its own natural course, reverse directions. And I think that's part of why there's a rise in co-ops. But there could be a premature rise in co-ops or cooperativism, which can then be re-sucked into the capitalism and looks like a control structure. Or there can be other things as well. But the thing that's interesting to me, I can't tell if the thought goes into it with the paper, is with internal controls, doing that via actually thought and paying attention to conditions, or is it by policy? So unlimited vacation is a policy, not necessarily indicative of it. Doesn't that in itself doesn't say anything about the conditions under which that policy is implemented.
Right.
And any time that there's a policy that overrides local conditions, there tends to be a kind of an imbalance, and that's I think tends to lean towards centralized authority or even totalitarianism and a distributed or decentralized system. So there's something distinct there that the challenge becomes an internalization of feeling what's best overall, rather than what's best for me personally, what's best for the system in which I operate, so that I'm maintaining the health of the ecosystem rather than the health of my own interests.
Yeah.
And before the tide turns, it's not really possible to do that. The one thing in the Throwing Rocks at the Google Bus that was really interesting is we look a lot at people. We say, this is a perfect example of what you're talking about. Of the people who are disrupting economies, right? They ain't disrupting nothing, right?
Right.
What are they doing? They're taking venture capital, or they're selling to Google. Well, you've just assimilated all that power right back into the same power structure that was already there. You haven't done anything. If you're ringing the bell at NASDAQ, you're part of the system. You're not disrupting anything.
Right.
So, but you feel like you are. You feel like, hey, I've done something good and I've got the reward. Well, that reward is, hey, thanks for joining the club. We'll take that now. You can go back to lying on the beach. which is, you know, but that's because we're so the operating system is so invisible to us that we don't recognize that we're feeding the power structure rather than we're not feeding the ecosystem that supports us. We're feeding the ecosystem that feeds somebody else, hoping that we'll get the crumbs from that.
Yeah. That invisible part is what I think is a very important part of what keeps it there. So, that's part of ideology is there's some unwritten rules somewhere that you kind of don't consciously think about or you're not supposed to talk about, which you can talk about as far as, you know, the unwritten rule that you're not supposed to take 3 months of vacation, even though it says unlimited vacation, or hey, you know, I have all these ideas and somebody else gets to get all the benefit from those things, or hey, it's not good for groups of people to get together and act kind of, I mean, you want to instantly call it socialism or communism or whatever, and, you know, you're going to have some type of government central planning or whatever, but then if you look at it, Apple, it's like, well, that's a multi-billion-dollar company. It looks like it's centrally planned to me. You know, but we don't call that some type of, you know, central planning socialistic group. So that the fact that you can't say that or it doesn't immediately appear to you is part of the ideology that says, okay, here's how power works. It wouldn't work if immediately people recognized it, right? So.
Yeah, I actually wanted to ask a question about that in this kind of vein. Like, it's not meant to be inflammatory. I don't know what people's political views are or anything like that, but do you feel like, or believe maybe that it would be this model is, or I'm sorry, I don't know names, but the guy that was talking about the good of the ecosystem versus, you know, so I feel like my thought is that maybe that might be harder in our country because we have certain things, and what you just said as well is, you know, unions are all but a dirty word now, and, you know, there's some changing in political tides, but I feel like as a country that doesn't even like to pay taxes or, you know, do certain things because it eats into my bottom line, I feel like that's kind of a harder sell. But do you think that's true or not?
I think that, yeah, I think that if there's a sell component to it, you've lost. All right, if you have to convince someone that that this benefit is better for them, that they don't see it inherently, then you're not ready, right? That's a level, you don't have the level of maturity necessary to really support that ecosystem, right? If given the opportunity, you know, you start working on something and you have some power, you gain even equal distribution power or whatever, and you're willing to sell that right to someone else who's going to do that, then yeah, there's something that you don't quite understand about that.
I think some of it's framing the question as well. When I'm describing software co-ops or co-ops in general to people, I say, imagine where the what's the group of people we were just talking about, the union, where the union just said, okay, let's raise money internally and buy the company. Now the union bought the company. That's kind of it. That's what happened. That's a co-op. And it's not a thing of, you know, is it bad to have unions? It's like, no, it's just who is in control and who benefits. It's all kind of the same people now.
So how do you get into a should ask somebody afterwards, how do you get into a software co-op?
There's 2 of them in the city, in Austin, so probably more now. But, yeah, I hesitate to. You probably won't hear me talk about unions too much. I kind of don't like that as an example because it's kind of like starting after you already lost or screwed up or something like that. Yeah, you can have a union that buys a factory or something like that. To me, some type of decentralized group, cooperative, or what have you, you need to feel market forces just like everyone else, any other type of entity. If you're inefficient, you need to die, all of that stuff. So I kind of don't care so much about that. But any type of worker-owned entity, I think, well, there's different ways, and we talked about this before in the organizational structure, organized structure, cooperatives. Talk, what was it, 2 months ago or last month or whatever. There's different ways to form, and there's different levels of hierarchy. You can have a democracy, you can have a republic, you can have things to where it's just small groups inside of a blanket. There's all kinds of stuff that, it happens within what you would think a traditional organization that you wouldn't call a cooperative. So you really don't have to go and reach towards the union example because, I don't know, that one's politically charged.
I'm just talking about something that is slightly counterculture, which co-op, I would say, kind of fits in that realm,
Yeah.
which is what more or less what I was getting at. Like,
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, hey, how's it going? Ian brought up something interesting with the Wikipedia structure, and I tried to read through it a couple hours ago. A couple references there that I really enjoyed. You probably could use some of the tools that they use to measure power and some other things within, or influence or reputation within the subgroups within Wikipedia. I don't know if you want to say anything about it.
Yeah, or I guess just to give a nutshell of what they were talking about, they essentially said, well, here's this golden opportunity to actually quantify how this organization has operated since its inception, because the history of the pages is all there. They basically have meta Wikipedia pages about how Wikipedia should work. And so they went through and basically, I think they just took individual words and looked for things that were related to norms and did clustering algorithms and yada yada yada. But they found some interesting things. There was this tendency to, at the start, obviously things are not fleshed out, and lots of things are kind of overlapping, and you have norms talking about, well, what if we conflict with this other thing? What do we do? And over time, they basically kind of separated out to where you're only talking about this one topic, and you don't even mention that other one. And so eventually, these things get very codified and stay very stable. But then you have this almost meta, almost like a cognitive dissonance going on, where you basically have this kind of meta rule that says, if the rule doesn't seem like you can do the right thing, then just do the right thing. But this, it's not written down as this is what you do. So it's almost like you get this nice feeling of, oh, everything is all working because we've got all these very nice thoughts lined up. But then it's almost like, think about it in terms of ethics. It's almost like you've got this codified deontological, rule-based system, but then really you've got this weird kind of virtue ethics thing going on subconsciously, where you just say, well, just the right thing to do because you've been here or you've seen what other people do, so just do it. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but it's kind of interesting. And that wasn't even really what we were talking about, though. The other part was that people who start the thing really set the tone, and basically what they set as the normative structure to start with tends to carry through all the way, and it almost ends up looking like an old-fashioned bureaucracy. It basically becomes almost impossible to have a revolution. And this wasn't intentional, I don't think, and everybody says, well, it's all ad hoc, and snuff anything out. It just happens. And so that's kind of fascinating. I wonder how if that really is just if it emerges almost always, and if it does, if there's anything you can do so that kind of like almost have some kind of norm that says you always have to revisit your norms and challenge them somehow. Is there any way to escape that? That's really what I'm.
So, interesting thought on that is reading Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, as well as a couple of other books along that line of morality, how morality fits in that, and looking at the brain structures of how when we think fast, we're responding from an emotional kind of a policy level response. It's a gut level. There's not a lot of thought there. There's a lot of thought, but it's based on history. It's not based on present conditions. And it's the more efficient way of thinking. It's evolutionary successful, but new circumstances require that you use the hard path, the more prefrontal cortex that requires more intensive energy output to actually overcome the problem. We resist that if we can, but sometimes you can't. But I think that whenever an organization lives for long enough, habits start to become so ingrained that you start to live by that policy. You stop questioning some of those norms, and that's whenever you start to dip down. Currently, technological progress is moving at such a pace it's difficult for any of that to last for too long. And I think that's one of the reasons that democratic structures and economic structures start to fail, is because they can't keep up with the pace of change. The policies no longer work for long terms. They only work for a short period of time. And so that we have this bubble and this kind of acceleration crash kind of a thing, where it's like we're fluttering at the edge of capacity. But I think that's a good thing, because it forces us to reuse that thing. So I think that there's probably ways that you can measure and see that we're relying too much on the gut reaction. So I think that it's not necessarily an external rule or policy for that, but a heuristic.
Yeah. Like to throw in that always remember there's a difference between a democratic structure and an autonomous structure. As far as handling fast change, it's supposed to be the heavily autonomous structures of the market. Or, example from a couple months ago, SAP had a massive amount of partners because they said we can't implement our software with all companies in the country or on the planet or whatever. So we have all these partners, and they work autonomously. We don't, they're their own entities, whatever, and very loosely create some policies, don't go ripping people off or whatever. So, but it's not necessarily just democracy. But it's autonomous. So that's one thing to keep in mind when you think of hierarchy, speed, we can't handle it. But then again, those same arguments that you would say that go against the democracy, they go against the hierarchy. Autonomy is the one that has all the speed, and that's the part that might suck, is you can still control an autonomous structure.
That's why I keep thinking that it would be nice if there was a way to have your organization kind of have the system 1 and system 2, where when you're doing the slow thinking, you're thinking about ways to set up protocols and stuff like we've talked about before, to where you try to, pare down the problem space for when you do have to do the fast stuff, so that you are able to effectively make quick decisions, but then after, periodically or whatever, go back to the slow and say, was our policy or protocol or whatever you want to call it, was it effective in making things efficient? And if not, let's revisit it. So I think you have to have both.
Yeah.
You can't say we're going to do one or we're going to do the other. You have to figure out what that balance is and how to have the feedback right. And I don't know how, but I think it has to be there.
Yeah. So we got maybe about 10 minutes more. My whole thing is that if people generally understand how they can be exploited, then they'll naturally fight against it. And that's my point. I didn't put it in this paper because I wanted it to be open. But that's how I would say to combat it. So I have a whole slew of things that I want to talk about or write about, that this is how you exploit someone. This is how people get exploited. This is how you can do it. Everybody knows that, then they won't succumb to it. But when it's hidden, then you're just supposed to keep your nose clean, work hard, and everything will be fine. That's where you'll be getting exploited. So, but I don't know if anyone had any other things.
So just for the unspoken policies, the unspeakable policies, that something that would be an ethic, I think, would to be tested at. That you should always have some troublemakers who are willing to push that boundary just to call attention to the fact that, oh, hey, no, this is a policy. It's not spoken, but it is one.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I'm going to verbalize this thing because it's real.
You almost need like culture pen testers.
Yeah. And they exist. It's just
I'm assholes.
well, there's that, but you can use those people to demonstrate project power. So okay, now we're going to punish that group, or we're going to discipline that group. That's the part where it's still a problem. And I don't think you can get away from having hidden rules, and I don't think you can easily. I think the best way is just everyone needs to know how to exploit something, then you'll be fine. But have the troublemakers or what have you, those brave souls. And, yeah. Anyone else? This is pretty heavy reading this time, kind of out of our normal stuff. So I appreciate you guys going through it.
Well, just this gets down a rabbit trail, and but it really did seem like it was saying, okay, let's talk about rule-based systems, and this is what happens with the rules. And really, a lot of it was don't do this, don't do this. How people looked into what happens if you do things like virtue ethics, or saying, as a general policy, we should strive toward this. I mean, Google has the don't be evil, but that's maybe not a good example. But is there a way to measure if that's effective at maybe preventing the sort of things that this is talking about that emerge?
I think.
I don't know if that's a good question. But
No, I mean, so the way that this thing is written, my mindset is that effective for controlling people? Yeah. But is that effective from stopping people from controlling people? I don't know about that. But it's great to have ambiguous rules if you're in charge, because then you can selectively prosecute who you want.
About having ambiguous rules, it's, I guess.
But they'll be evil. Something like that.
That was probably a bad example. I don't have a good example. Maybe it doesn't. Just
Here's
yeah.
Here's a thing that address both of you guys is sorry. Here's the thing that just like the REST standard. When they were working on the first web servers, one of the big problems is you had Netscape and the Mosaic guys or whoever, or the Motif guys or whatever, and everyone was like sending specs to each other and this types of stuff, and it doesn't work. Send the code over. That's the spec. And then same kind of thing with compilers, right? You have the C++ spec, and you had Ada, which is language I use programming, and a bunch of other, and it was like all these standard bodies, and they would send specs, and then you've got the Rubies and the Pythons come out, and it's like, no, this is the spec, the interpreter. Take a look. And everyone, it actually worked, and it doesn't matter what you thought the spec was supposed to be. The thing that runs, that's the spec. And if you could do that, then that would solve the problem with spec that can be interpreted in different ways. But actually, here's the example.
Yeah, but I mean, you don't have a lot of mission critical stuff like safety critical stuff running on Python or Ruby. I mean, there are things like Ada that guarantee that your thing won't explode. And that's just like the epitome of spec.
Yeah. Mm.
And I would point to Go. I'm a fanboy, but the Go spec,
Yeah.
there are only a couple of other compilers extant besides the reference implementation, if you want to call it that, but the spec isn't really ambiguous.
So next week we're going to discuss Ethereum-based contracts and payments through the organization based on joint contract
Sounds good.
negotiations. All right, just wanted to make sure that's
You
where
want
we're
to do
headed.
that paper?
You got 1 minute,
That's
Chris.
I got a month. I'd have to go read about Ethereum. I just went through meetups and found it interesting for voting and for other things. But I also hear you can do payments and distribute. Whoever gets the work done gets paid, type stuff. So
Yeah, I find it interesting too, but I'd like someone else to write a paper.
We had. I like the idea, but I'm iffy about who gets paid, and now you're talking money, and do you understand it well enough that when you go in, what's the risk? There were several contracts that were offered up to us that we didn't take that were like that. If you get the work done in this time and whatever, then you get paid.
Yeah. There was another thing I saw. There was a Bitcoin transaction where the mining fee was worth about $137,000 US, and the actual amount was what you normally would put in for the Bitcoin mining fee to verify the transaction. So people are confused. Was it somebody trying to launder money and print new Bitcoin by having it? Because when you do a mine, it becomes freshly minted and not traceable per se. Or was it somebody that made a mistake in their software and flipped because it sat on the blockchain for like 4 minutes, which means anybody on the planet could have been the one to get that $137,000 mining fee for just a few minutes of time on their machine. So then I think it's really understanding it well enough not to make stupid programming mistakes that cost you 6 figures, 7 figures.
Yeah. Right. I think we're good.
Anyone have a topic other than Chris? What do you think, Emily?
Yeah. Systems theory.
Yeah, I'll think about it.
Okay. Okay. All right. So Ethereum is one, and you got nothing.
I mean, I'd love to see how the subgroups work in a lot of the larger cooperatives.
Subgroups.
Yeah, so like Mondragon and stuff, where you have lots of those. So how do you make those from the outside? It looks like one co-op, and then
But there's a bunch of
inside,
cooperatives.
lots of little in the organization between those.
I'm really interested in that idea as well.
Okay.
I thought along the same lines as what does the lab of this look like? How do you turn theory into practice? I mean, yeah, there are co-ops. Can you do something without actually? Can you do experiments that actually test some of this stuff? And I think that you can kind of. But
Yeah.
a lot of the stuff is pretty heavy duty. It would be interesting to think about what that actually looks like in practice.
Yeah. Well, we can do that for sure. The groups within Mondragon would be a good thing to study or demonstrate. So we can do that.
I don't know if it's directly related to software co-ops, but I like that Volk has a .coop. I was thinking about making one for II and writing up the process. You guys have done it once, but if we get it to happen multiple times and make a subgroup or whatever, then that might combine the two things of how to become a co-op on paper and on the web and on relating to other co-ops internationally or whatever.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that we do is theoretical and philosophical. I think it'd be good to have some part of it where people can look and see directly practical. That sounds good, Chris. Maybe as a sub very specific for the Mondragon. And I'm sure we can pick some others.
Okay. Does anyone want to do one? 'Cause
I
if
would
I'm
like
doing
to.
it, then I might just pick what I want to do.
I think everyone should do how to read the con.
How to what?
It's a reference from the document. Go pick up the book. It's short.
It's only 100 pages.
It's like 100 pages. It's not a big deal. Go read it. It'll help you with everything else you read. In Spiral, what about them looking at picking? I'd be up for studying a company and how they're broken up. I don't know. What are some other cooperatives? Try to find out about how they're organized.
Yeah.
And maybe compare those. I don't know.
Maybe sure to do 2 different nations or 2 different hemispheres or something where there's not. I don't want 2 American companies.
So Mondragon, Spain, and then NCR, not NCR. I think there's 2 NCRs. Not Inspiral. I mean, there's nothing. I mean, you can find a little bit about Inspiral. There's no books written about it.
Yeah.
So that's why I would hesitate to that. But NCR has a book written about them.
Yeah.
So, and these are large, 20,000 people, 50,000 people. So.
The John Lewis.
Yeah. That's another one. So NCR is a software co-op.
Okay, so Chris, I think we have enough. You up for taking on one of those, digging in, research?
All right. Anybody want to be a second and commit to help me on that? I'm not going to run off and do it by myself.
I'm gonna go. I'll be willing to pick up at least one of these, maybe 2 of the companies to dig in.
No. Okay.
I don't mind putting something together with you so that we contrast a couple of different companies and present some thoughts, cohesive thoughts.
Well, anyone has thoughts on companies they'd like to know about, maybe post to the meetup or the Hangout page, and we'll add those to the list and then see what we can find. And any information on this, like Watson's saying that Mondragon has a lot of books. If there's material out there, then obviously that'll be a lot easier.
If we don't have a mailing list, I might set that up either on Google or somewhere where there's ongoing conversation. It's easier to follow than for me.
Okay, cool. Reach out to me and we'll get something set up.
Okay.
All right. Thanks a lot, everyone.
Thanks, guys. Brandon, if you want more information, just contact me.
And it's on meetup.com.
All right.
Cool.
Cheers.
See you guys.